Hi, everybody. Hold on. I do things backwards sometimes. Help me, Lord. Welcome to the Light Gate. We are coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We are on Roku, we are on YouTube, and we are on Facebook and many other types of platforms. We are going to have a wonderful show tonight. Someone we love dearly is coming back, and it's going to be great. And I have an announcement to make before I hand over to Preston. We are now going to a new time slot on Monday nights. It is going to be 1 hour earlier. So instead of 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, it will be 5 p.m. Pacific Time on Monday nights and 8 p.m. on Eastern Time. Y'all mark your dates. This begins on July 1st. That's where our new slot will be. We're hoping to be able to include more people overseas who really have a hard time talking to us because it's the middle of the night. And it's more prime time for us. And we're excited that we've been given this opportunity. I want to thank our producer for that. She is a wonderful person. Thank you, Michelle. All right, here we go. Let's get going with the Light Gate. Preston, take it away.
Thank you, Dolly. Yeah, I'm excited about our new time slot. It's not too much of a difference, so hopefully that won't impact any of you guys out there. I know if you're on the West Coast, you might have to rush home a little bit earlier, but if you're on the East Coast, you won't have to stay up as late. Well, we'll see how it goes. Either way, I'm excited about it. So yeah, pretty cool news. So thank you all for joining us once again on The Light Gate, episode 60. We're just trucking right along. I, of course, am your host, Preston Dennett, and my lovely co-host is Dolly Safran. And what else can I say? Yeah, episode 60, we have a very exciting guest. He's returning because we really only skimmed over his research. It's very, very extensive. He's a very knowledgeable guy, author of several books. Well, we'll get to him quite shortly. But you guys, you know, I love to say hi to you all in chat. It's because of you we do this show. So let me just go down to some of you folks here and just say hello to all of you because it's always awesome to see you. And let's start with Renee, who came in first with a lot of emojis. And I hope your pets are okay. Because I see you've got a little cry profusely thing going on there. So hope all is all right with that. Michael Kennedy, hello. Always bringing the popcorn. Awesome to see you. Great love to you.
Hi. Yeah.
Hello, Scarlet Fire. Glad you could make the live. Very awesome. Something about a live show that's just a bit different, I think, from the recorded shows.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more fun. Bob, it's awesome to see you here. Still thinking about our very interesting conversation. So really cool that you've joined us tonight. And who else do we have here? Scarlet Fire.
Hi.
Howdy. And Sukhoi, who says, good evening, chat. Glad to be here. Yeah, I had an awesome weekend. I hope you did too, Sukhoi.
Yeah.
And who else? J.R. Amadeus Schiffer. Yes, we're getting ready. This is going to be a fun show. Andy, hello, and Miss Mary. Who else do we have here? Osvaldo Greco. I'm very excited to hear Joshua Cutchin. I read his books, and his ideas are a real revolution for the UFO and paranormal world. Yes, he is really doing in-depth research and uncovering aspects of this subject that a lot of researchers are simply afraid to even look at. So it's a real treat to have him here tonight. Hello, Dawn, and who else? Catherine Fourfeathers.
Hi, Catherine.
And always happy to see you, Catherine. And Jenny Lynn, good evening. Flying Psychonaut. Very cool.
Cool.
Scuba Maru.
Thanks.
Hello. Studio Opinions. Yes, I had a good Father's Day, even though I'm not really a daddy to any children here on Earth. Maybe some alien babies. Only half kidding. Let's see what else we got.
Her babies told him Happy Father's Day.
Bebo Plebe. Hooray. Thanks for joining us. And I love these names you guys come up with. Albert Witch Wiggler. Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Catherine and okay, Kaj. Thank you, Kaj, for all the really kind comments you're putting on my YouTube channel. Oh, all the way from Brazil. I think Brazil is a later time zone than us, actually. I was shocked to hear that. They stick way out into the ocean there. But I think there's probably different time zones. You can let me know, Kaj.
Yeah.
Hello, Daniel. Like the audience is only Americans, typical Americans, LOL. It's awesome that we reach the world. It really is cool. Who else we have here? Susan Lawrence. Anytime is a good time for like cake. Oh,
thank you.
Very, very nice of you. BW and Louise says, yeah, 8 p.m. still works for me here on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, and there's Linda Catlett. And I promise I'm going to get through this pretty quick. We have tomorrow, kiddo, from Australia, because it's already there tomorrow, kiddo.
Yep. For sure.
And Josephine McKinnon. Ah, another Australian from down under. Very cool.
My.
I have friends there. One day I'm going to visit. There's something about Australia that really draws me. I interviewed a guy there not long ago who had a really interesting encounter. Full on board and everything. Star Orchid, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Your generous, what is it called? Super sticker, super chat donation.
Yeah. Thank
you. Happy, joy. I love it. Thank you. It really helps a lot. So thank you so much. KM, aka Aunt Katsatic. Hello, and thank you for joining us. Oh, and here's lovely Susan Alloway. Awesome to see you here, Susan. Hope you're doing really well in your forested location. We live surrounded by forests. It's wonderful. I absolutely love it compared to LA. Gamma Galaxy. Yo, that's a lot of O's.
That's a long way.
Thank you for joining us. CT Guitar Guy. Oh, thank you for joining us. Yes, we're both doing quite well, all things considered, the planet that we live on.
Yep.
We have a normal person with us. Wow. It's not often you see a normal person. I'm kidding. Thank you for joining us. Oh, yeah. This does take a lot of work. So thank you for recognizing that. Dolly will tell you I work, 10 hours a day.
10 hours a day, sometimes longer.
Okay, Renee, I'm glad to hear that you're okay. So that's awesome. Pedro Spinelli, also from Brazil. I don't think I...
My goodness.
That's another guy, right?
Yes.
Very cool.
Therefore.
Look at that, Dahlia. All over the world. I love how this subject brings people together.
Yep. Varso good.
And namaste. Always count on you, namaste.
Namaste.
I mean, I'm beyond words at this point. So all I can say is thank you. You have my endless gratitude. And I'm just really honored and delighted to have you here and call you a friend. So thank you. John Williams, we're rocking the free world for sure. Terry Denise Lehman from Alabama. Nice.
Ooh, close to Alabama. Yeah.
I love that house show we watch that's from Alabama. I forget what it's called. Good Bones or something. That's not it, but something like that. Josephine McKinnon, you always have somewhere to visit Aunt Mine if you come. Who knows? Maybe one day our pathways will cross. Steinar Björk, all the best from Norway.
I do.
I recognize the moniker. Thank you. Yeah, I've been covering some cases from Norway recently. Got another one from Honefoss, Norway, up in my next YouTube video to drop shortly. So that should be interesting for you, Steiner. Okay, Kevin Washington, how are you doing? Glad to see you. Ruth Kleiber and
Hey, Ruth.
Connet, if I haven't already.
Hi, Janice.
Oh.
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay, I'm now about to get in official trouble for taking too long, so I'm going to rush through the last of these. Scott Nixon, hello.
Hi.
Yoga with Denise, Gamma Galaxy, and okay, I have to stop. Mountain Dan from East Tennessee. I better get going. Okay, let me introduce our guest tonight, who, as you know by now, is Joshua Cutchin. He is a previous guest on this show. He was very popular. We had a great conversation. We talked all about some of his research into ET foods and drinks and Bigfoot and fairies and all kinds of other stuff. But he's got quite a few books. I'm just going to flash a few here real quick because these books definitely deserve to be better known. I really want to talk a lot about this one, Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death and the paranormal. It's a multi-volume set. This is what we talked a lot about last week, A Trojan Feast, the food and drink offerings of aliens, fairies, and Sasquatch. Who would think that there's a link there between all of these? That's what's really cool about his research, because it makes it pretty darn undeniable. So yeah, this is a multi-volume set, Ecology of Souls. There's some really high strangeness going on in a lot of these encounters, so I'm super excited to talk about that. He's written about high strangeness in the Bigfoot phenomena. Again, a multi-volume set. Here's volume 2, High Strangeness in the Bigfoot phenomena. Volume 2, Evidence. Where the footprints end, the truth begins. Thieves in the Night, a brief history of supernatural child abductions. Yikes. That cover is frightening, Joshua. But it certainly is eye-grabbing. A Brimstone Deceit. Them Old Ways Never Died. This is a novel. Very cool.
That looks good.
Fairy Films. That looks like a fun book to write. And yeah, there's just the banner. So let me get to the actual bio. For those of you who don't know Joshua, you should. He's a sought-after researcher, author, and presenter, and has appeared on a wide variety of paranormal programs discussing his work. He's been on Coast to Coast, of course. That's the big one. And on TV, the History Channel's show Ancient Aliens, and is the author at last count, 7 critically acclaimed books, very well received, including, as I showed, A Trojan Feast. Let's see, Food and Drink Offerings of Aliens, Fairies, and Sasquatch, which is also in Spanish, by the way. Also, The Brimstone Deceit, an in-depth examination of supernatural scents, and Otherworldly Odors and Monstrous Miasmas. Thieves in the Night, a brief history of supernatural child abductions, Where the Footprints End, High Strangeness in the Bigfoot phenomena, and of course his multi-volume set, Ecology of Souls, and the novel we just saw, Them Old Ways Never Died. Okay, I'm kind of repeating myself, sorry guys. But Joshua has been invited to speak at Georgia MUFON Events, the International Fortean organization's FortFests, X-Filers United Conference, ConCarolinas, Strange Realities Conference, East-West Bookshop, Tewksbury Public Libraries, Fright Nights, and it just goes on and on. He's been at the Midwest Conference on the Unknown, Dragon Con in Georgia. You've been there, haven't you, Dolly?
Yeah, about 1 million times. Yep.
Also,
didn't know it. Okay. Yeah.
Archives of the Impossible in Texas, and an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon in New York City. He's also an award-winning musician. Love music. His website and other information is in the show description. It's also right here at the bottom in case any of you guys are interested, but let's just bring him in so we can really get to the show.
Hi.
Thanks again for coming onto the show.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, and congratulations on the growth of the channel and episode 60. This is just so cool. Here's to, I was bad at math, so like 3 times 60 more, 90 more. no, wait. 180 more. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joshua. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm really excited about it. And it's fun. These subjects are something I think everyone deserves to know about, and especially your research, because I don't think people have any idea how far back this all goes.
Oh, I know.
The amazing commonalities between the little people that are in all cultures and the cryptozoology and so forth.
Well, we all know that UFOs only came to Earth for the first time after the Kenneth Arnold sighting, right? I always find that so funny when people say that. It's like, yeah,
I don't think so.
I think it's
way before that. Yeah.
Yep. I think it's been with us as long as we have been us. I think it's been with us. And who knows, maybe before we were us. But yeah, it's and that's sort of always been my perspective is, well, the two things, and I might be repeating myself from last time, but number one, I do see a lot of overlap between these topics as you were talking about. And number two, there are a lot of little ins and outs that have not been explored like I think they should. So I try to find the weird things that people don't like to talk about as much and try to sort of find out if we can find out more from exploring those.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that some folks are just nuts and bolts only, don't want to hear anything high strangeness.
Yeah.
Put on their blinders.
Yeah.
I was just recently found another case of a modern case of a little person, the little man of Dunn, North Carolina. I don't know if you've heard of this one, but
yeah, I think Janet Board wrote about that in her fairy book, I think. But I grew up in North Carolina. I actually as a kid, I had a pet hedgehog, and we got our hedgehog from a lady in Dunn. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I don't
just
know.
So you know, that is my favorite animal ever. I love hedgehogs. I love
so
hedgehogs. I've had my own as oh my gosh! Wow.
That's fun.
But yeah, I mean, people still see little people to this day, and that's something that's always been really interesting to me ever since I first was clued into the connection between the fairies and all this other stuff in Passport to Magonia. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people probably had that same experience where they're like, "Whoa, this looks very similar." The Venn diagrams overlap pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And there's so many different aspects of the modern paranormal UFO fields and the Bigfoot field, I would argue too, that touches upon some of those older fairy myths from Western Europe and really worldwide, because it was sort of a worldwide thing that people would encounter.
So I know we already talked about this a little bit, but just to bring people back up to speed, how is it that you started to connect these? Was it, because Jacques Vallée, of course, and John Keel, Lauren Coleman, I think, these are the guys who really sort of pioneered the idea that there's a link between these subjects. Is that what brought you into them?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I suppose that what something like Vallée or Keel sort of showed to me was that you could do that. Like, you could mix up your peanut butter with your chocolate, so to speak. And that you might learn something from it, and like anybody at least who hasn't had very many experiences myself, there are going to be a lot of dead ends, and there are going to be a lot of things that you look into that don't necessarily bear themselves out. But you can never tell. Sometimes you do find a nugget of gold amongst all the mud. So yeah, I suppose it was sort of that sort of perspective. I mean, the real light bulb moment for me was with A Trojan Feast, which was my first book, where I had heard for ages, I'd heard that that prohibition, that you shouldn't take food from the fairies. Later, now almost 10 years later, I realized that it's a worldwide prohibition against accepting food in the other world. You'll hear that in some indigenous stories about the afterlife. You shouldn't take food if you have an NDE, or you'll be stuck there forever. And I remembered hearing about an indigenous tribe that had the exact same rule for their Bigfoot. And I was like, that's really specific. and so from there on out, it was like, let's go interdisciplinary all the way, comparing all these different things, because I'm really not just interested in one thing or the other thing. I'm interested in all these subjects and always have been. And I think that sometimes these artificial barriers that we erect between these different subjects has not always served our knowledge, hasn't always served our progress very well in understanding more about it.
Yeah, well, that's what I love about your research. You're not cherry picking and shoe fitting. You're presenting the evidence first
It is.
and
Yes.
leaving it open to interpretation.
Well, that's usually the plan. What else I like to do is if there's one point that I'm proving on based off of one case, I usually try to mention that, like, this shows up this one time. But for the most part, if I'm trying to like prove a point that this is a recurring theme, I'll like throw 5 cases at you and be like, okay, I don't know if every one of these is true. I don't know if I'm misreading 1 or 2 of these, but like you can tell that there's like a constellation of things happening here that seem to repeat themselves. And that's sort of been the way that I've tried to approach
Consensus works.
I think there's one baseline that we can all agree upon, regardless of origin or what these things are, is that they do exist. That there are Bigfoot, there are fairy folk and little people, and what people perceive as ETs, certainly. And my leanings towards the ET.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We hashed that out a little bit last time. But here's the thing. I've been thinking about this. The conversation that we had, and I have some upcoming conversations with some other people that are a little bit more in the ET camp than I am. So I've been thinking about this and the common ground that we share. And what I've sort of landed on is that even if my really strange ideas that I do have about some of the stuff, even if that's incorrect, it still shows you the way that we interact with, the way that we interpret these things, and I think that there's some utility in that as well. I mean, this is common ground, honestly, that I've found with some open-minded skeptics, is that, obviously I don't share the same perspective as they do, but I have said to a couple of them who are approaching it, in good faith, and I've said things like, even if all of this is a bunch of BS, we're still learning something about ourselves, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'll meet you with that. And of course, then as soon as I hang up the phone or I turn away, I'm like, but it's not all it's true. But but the thing is, I think that a lot of us share more common ground, not only when discussing this, but in terms of politics and the way that we interact with each other. We have a lot more common ground as human beings than I think we do differences.
Exactly.
Humans are, and I hope we get into this tonight. This is important for me as well. Consciousness, soul, who we are, where we come from. That's been the very first thing that a lot of humanity has been working on for centuries, and understanding that. And it's interesting when you conceptualize the universe, okay? We're on this planet. We're in a solar system with many planets, and we have a central sun. And we are on the outside arm of a galaxy that's spiraling, that is millions of light years across, and it's spiraling also. And then we now see out that there are millions and billions and trillions of other galaxies out there spiraling around and making their movements. And you can look at it like this. Every time we take a leap up on the ladder of knowledge, okay, your perspective changes, your knowledge gathering changes. What comes to you because you see it, hear it, feel it, experience it, changes. And it adds in to that your own consensus of understanding, okay? And we have come a long way in this world as of the last 100 years. We've made leaps and huge bounds. And yes, we see people firmly planted in the ground, not wanting to move, and literally stuck in that rung that they're in, and then others just going wild about it. And everybody is still trying to make sense out of all of it. And it's quite the thing. And I am enjoying the fact that we're talking about it. I'm enjoying the fact that we can sit here with one another and give the information that we have from our experience and from what we've gleaned knowledge, and made cognitive answers for ourselves, and give them to others so that it might help them lift up. And it's really important. It's really, really important because the view is incredible, of this. And we just need to, be ready to go into it.
I could not have said it better myself. I mean, people are comfortable in their comfort zones, right? But the only time you ever grow is when you step out of it. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. ever with anything, like,
Yeah.
It's not just the infinite universe. There's other dimensions.
Exactly.
Right. A big role in all of this, and that's what I kind of want to get into because this book, which I think is one of your later nonfiction contributions, Ecology of Souls, exploring a new mythology of death and the paranormal. Because we didn't really get to touch much on that in the previous show. So, what can you tell us a little bit about what that's about and what drew you to it? And let's dive in.
Okay, so I'll meet you guys back at 10:50, and we'll wrap up with the last couple of questions. No, so over the years, I can't remember the first time I heard it, but from the moment I did, it's stuck in my head, which is that Anne Strieber quote. This has something to do with what we call death, what she had noted after collecting all the correspondence to Whitley after communion. So that had always been in the back of my head. Something else had always been in the back of my head since reading Passport to Magonia, which was, I am not speaking ill of that book because it has informed so much that I've done, and it's been a real inspiration. And as you can tell, it's sort of been a keystone in everything that I've done. But at the same time, there's something that sort of gets left on the table in that discussion, which is, what would a Passport to Magonia written in the year 1200 have looked like? And what I mean by that is a lot of Passport to Magonia, if you really wanted to present a low resolution version of it and summarize it really quickly, you'd say, hey, a lot of this UFO stuff has similarities to the fairy stuff. That's Passport to Magonia in a nutshell, even though it's about spirits too. But if you wrote if a 13th century version of Dr. Vallée had written Passport to Magonia, it might very well have been, hey, this fairy stuff looks a lot like the way we used to talk about the dead. And when you start unpacking a lot of these traditions, I've found this to be the case all over the world, but it is very prevalent in Western Europe. You'll find that a lot of cultures tended to talk about the dead being either conflated with fairies or having some sort of relationship with fairies. People would go among the fairies and they'd see a dead neighbor. People would sometimes be taken by the fairies after they died. People would die and become a fairy. So there was some sort of relationship that was always there. It wasn't until the rise of theosophy in the late 19th century that you started having the adoption of some of these ideas from people like Paracelsus, who were talking about elementals and gnomes and undines and sylphs and all things like that. I'm not discounting those as a possibility. I'm just saying that that belief sort of merged with the fairy belief, which always tended to be a bit more centered around the dead. Maybe it was lesser pagan deities that sort of got turned into fairies. No one really knows about fairy origins, but those things sort of came together, and that elemental theosophic idea is the one that really took root in culture. I mean, you just look at Disney and you can see that everywhere. Yeah. So if we sort of use the transitive property, we've already got Anne saying over here that this has something to do with death, and we've got, well, the UFO occupants resemble fairies, and the fairies resemble the dead. You've got all this stuff, and then you throw into that, the work of Kenneth Ring, talking about near-death experiences and their similarities to the UFO contact experience. And you've got Eddie Bullard talking about shamanic initiations and their similarity to the UFO contact experience. And, in a lot of cultures, you can't paint this brush too broadly because we're dealing with a lot of different cultures, but in a lot of cultures, shamanic initiation was sometimes the purpose of it was to bring you past the barrier of life into that death realm and come back with knowledge and sort of powers of that. So in some ways, I remember writing Ecology of Souls and saying, this isn't really talking about anything new, but I think that if it has something that is worth bringing to the table, it's putting all these different things in dialogue with one another, which is sort of like, in a lot of ways, the culmination of the way that my brain has been working over the past decade, putting these things all into the same pot and stirring it up. And I promise you, like my intention was to write just a book on UFOs and death. But as I did, well, I got to talk about the shamanism stuff, and I got to talk about the NDE stuff. And much to my surprise, ancient monuments and ley lines enter the discussion. We can talk about that at some point if you want to. Cryptids came into the discussion, which is something that I never would have expected. I have an abiding fear of lake monsters now, which is the goofiest thing that I think I could have ever come up the other side of this project.
Wow.
But it sort of ended up folding in a lot of these different things. This recurring motif that I had kept on noticing of headlessness in some encounters across, again, all these different spectrums, and what that perhaps says about the contact experience. So I realize how pretentious a new mythology of death and the paranormal sounds, but it kind of ended up being my own personal mythology that I was authoring over the course of it. And you know, in some ways, I think I could have just walked away from everything and felt like I'd said my piece. But, you know, my ideas have continued to evolve, and that's something that as my mentor Greg Bishop always sort of drummed into my head, is that, you know, if you're not constantly evolving your ideas, you're probably being a stick in the mud.
Yeah.
And what's I think I even say something to that effect in the second volume of Ecology of Souls, something like calcified minds are brittle, you know, so you get set one way.
In psychology, you have to have an elastic brain, otherwise you die.
You do, and you have to be able to incorporate new information and not reject it outright because it doesn't fit your own view of things, right? And so that was a big part of this too. I mean, not for ideological reasons or for religious reasons or anything like that. I was hearing these stories of, and y'all have heard them too, you've written about them, Preston, of reincarnation in the UFO context scenario, and pre-birth memories in the UFO scenario. And like I wanted to, I like to push where there's mush in my own thinking, right? And I just didn't like that. I didn't know why. It wasn't necessarily incongruous with the way that I looked at things. But I wanted to sort of be like, okay, Josh, I mean, these stories aren't going away. They come from honest people, and they've been a part of the phenomenon since the very beginning. I mean, I would argue that if you look at the beginnings of ufology in the 20th century, it was also sort of an outgrowth of spiritualism and theosophy. If you look at some of those early figures like Wayne Aho and Diana, I can't remember her name, but anyway, there are a lot of early UFO figures who were right off the bat talking about things like reincarnation. And, you know, the modern disclosure obsessed ufologist has no time for that, you know. And that was a trap that I did not want to fall into either. But at the same time, those stories made me uncomfortable. So I wanted to interrogate that and see if that could fit into this as well. And I think clearly it does. I mean, I think clearly it does.
It does. You're exactly right. Yes.
And we have to embrace all of it, or else you're not going to solve any
You're not going to see the whole picture. No forest for the trees occurs when you do that.
Yes.
If you exclude everything and not willing to include everything so you can see the total picture, you're walking around in a circle with blinders on. You can't see, you know. It's important to look.
I remember when Ann Strieber put out that quote, and Whitley Strieber started talking about, you know, some cases where people had seen deceased loved ones on UFOs, and I'm like, what? I don't have any cases. And I started scouring the literature, and there weren't a whole lot. I took a search to find some. And then I finally got my first case. Don Anderson, who was very religious, Mormon, ended up leaving that after he had his encounter, which he likened to a near-death experience because all these memories came back. But he ended up seeing his deceased father, who he never knew. And all his genetics comes from his father. That's
fascinating.
On board a UFO. That was my first personal case.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going on the back burner. I wrote about it. I did not edit. I don't edit people's accounts.
Good for you. Yeah. Well, it's the sort of thing where, like, it would be disingenuous to come in and say that it happens often, right? Like, it doesn't happen often, I don't think.
Yes, it does. I'm going to posit something.
Okay. Well, what I was definitely going to say was that it definitely happens often enough. But I'm more than open to being corrected.
Okay. Posit something to you. First of all, people seem to believe that ET have nothing to do with us, really. That they're separate, and they are not. They are us. We are them. We're all one. They have the same genetics. We all have DNA. Everything throughout the entire universe has DNA. If you're alive, you have DNA. It just rolls out differently all over the place. But there is a commonality within the universe, and that is we are our own little stencil of what exists. Okay, we're a template of it. And one of the things that we have in common with ET is that they live and die like we do. They don't exist forever. There'd be billions of them. They'd be running us down if that were true. Okay, we experience
as well.
So that's the thing. So if they're alive like we are, then and we believe that we have a soul, and that we when we pass from this body and go somewhere else, that they do too. And people don't think about that. They also don't think about the fact that one of the interests of ET in us is that exact fact, because we're that related to them. And they're trying to teach us what consciousness is by using our abilities, learning to tap into that, tapping into the fact that we are conscious and understand what that really means. So yes, it's absolutely imperative that that's one of the contingencies that you have to grapple with when you're thinking about this subject. Absolutely. If we have ghosts, they have ghosts. Can our ghosts go where their ghosts go? Oh, yes, they can.
Yep.
Can they OBE to our ghosts and get them to come and visit you? Oh, yes, they can. Just like we can do the same for them. It's all connected. It's all interrelated to one another. And you might not have a lot, because people until this time, really honestly, were shrouding it like Nostradamus had the quatrains from their own perspective, from their own religious beliefs. And they were trying to explain what was going on with them from that.
So are some UFOs haunted by ET ghosts? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not saying, I think they're a little bit more involved with that. I mean, I'll give you for instance, okay? One of my experiences on board is that we brought a doctor on board who was nearing the end of his life, okay? And they knew he was going to pass. He had no family, no friends, no nothing. And he wanted to pass on board, and they allowed it. Their ritual while the dead are dying, the people are dying and going into death, is to surround them and be with them through the entire process from one side to the other. They OBE better than you could possibly imagine, and they actually go with them and guide them to the next place. It's a rite of passage for them. And this is something that we've not taken advantage of on this planet. Now, there are lots of shamans who have, over the centuries and way back, and other peoples who've got that ritual of helping the dead to pass.
Yeah, the bardo is what immediately came to mind. It sounds so much like that, what you were describing.
Exactly. So when you take all this into consideration, it always comes back to two things. Definitely read up everything you can about what everybody says, and then find the commonalities between all of them, and sit down and think, well, if they can do it, why can't I? And then try to raise your abilities, your consciousness into that next realm. But I'm asking you now, personally, what's your take on it? What have you gleaned from it?
It's quite similar to sort of where you're going, and that is, I got to the end of this journey, and I found that I was believing in fewer distinctions than I once was. And if I could explain that,
Okay.
We tend to think on a very sort of a one-to-one basis in most of our Western cultures, modern culture, whatever you want to call it. I heard something on a channel one time that was just like the most disappointingly ignorant thing I'd heard in a long time, which was, first of all, they said, well, if reincarnation's real, then why are there ghosts? And I'm like, well, maybe they didn't learn. Maybe it's a different aspect of themselves. I mean, like, you've got these older traditions, thinking especially of the Norse and the Egyptians and a lot of indigenous traditions, where we have multiple souls. So, like, let's just put that aside. But the other thing is, what was also said is, like, this sort of reductionist argument, like, well, how come is it that when I go to a reincarnation convention, there are 15 people who think they were Napoleon and 25 people who think they were Cleopatra? They can't all be Napoleon and Cleopatra. I'm like,
this is true, right?
Or, well, I mean, kind of. So where I sort of landed with, because the reincarnation research is so good, Ian Stevenson, Jim Tucker, like, all that stuff is just top notch. I wonder, and again, I'm not saying this is a truth, but this is sort of what I've grown to suspect, that there is, that metaphor that we so often use at death, rivers going into the sea, and what happens when all those little droplets of rain fall into the river. They get all jumbled up, and distinctions disappear, right?
What is individuality?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it ties into this idea of ego death that you hear in so many of these NDEs and all their altered states of consciousness. And then those rivers go into the sea, and it's all just sort of this one thing. So yeah, you could get someone who is, in one person, you could have part Napoleon, part Cleopatra, part Zeta Reticulum, part if you adopt an animist perspective, which I'm sympathetic to, part the spirit of the landscape or weather patterns. I mean, I think that there's something to be said for that outlook.
I want to lean toward mental health here real quick for a second and explain why I feel the way I do about this, what I've learned. Let's begin with this. I have past life memories. They're very acute and very exacting, and I know exactly what. I do not say exactly who I was for two reasons. One, it's my life. And two, I'm in a body that is frail, physical, and has issues. Okay. My physical mind is fallible. Okay. And it's not my job to make everybody else believe me. It's my job to prove to myself what I am. Okay. Right. There is a need in humanity to be understood and heard. Okay. And this hasn't to do with mental illness, but it does have to do with not being heard on the other side of it, and people who are not willing to help you walk existentially into the truth that really is you. Okay. We ignore one another to the point that we aren't helping with that at all, literally. And that's our fault. And it's one of the things that we need to work on as a species up here on this planet, as a race, because we're all the same. And we need to understand that healing, our understanding, healing is as much a part of evolution and wisdom, knowledge, and gaining knowledge as anything else in the world. So everything that I know about myself, I work on myself. I can't have anybody else believe me because I have to believe myself. I have to know the truth, absolutely know the truth. And so I just work on it and I look for clues. And there's some things that I'm just not going to know, not going to know yet. And I have about 1 billion things when I cross over again, and I'm going to pound them into myself somehow or just work it out. But it may also be that's the lesson why we're here for that. And I try to, when I talk to people about their lives and who they were, it doesn't matter if you were Napoleon, it really doesn't. What it does matter is, what did that do to you? What is it you're learning from it? What was your karma from that situation? And how can you help yourself? Period. And I absolutely will listen to anybody who tells me anything they want to tell me. Okay. And I take that into account. So there's a skew. When you're gaining knowledge and gleaning knowledge and you hear what people are saying, you have to remember the outside stuff. There's more than one layer to this. And this, we go back to hearing the forest and the trees, the sounds, the birds, the sights, and seeing all of it. That's why people who do grid work on things, physical grid work, and they're counting things and looking at everything in a grid, because almost you have to go that microscopic with knowledge till you can go out with it, and get it all together. So that's my take on it. I know better than to believe that everybody's been Napoleon. Okay.
Yeah. And I think we, in life in general, but especially in this domain, we dramatically underappreciate the importance of perspective.
Yeah.
And honestly, from what I've seen, how intimate and sort of tailor-made these experiences can be to an individual. And it's something that they need. I mean, it's something that they need at that time. I mean, so this is something that I've kind of become a little bit irritated with some in the paranormal community, is they'll find out that one person had this series of synchronicities, and then they will have that synchronicity and they'll be like, oh, it's I'm like, no, you're missing the point. Like, those were their synchronicities.
Right.
You need your own synchronicities. Like, that's what makes them important. Yeah,
exactly.
Now, Dolly, I kind of want to ask you a question, because you alluded to something earlier about the ease with which these things tend to slip into the OBE state. I'm not convinced that a significant portion of the sort of light in the sky variety of UFO sightings are not some form of astral travel, either of beings from other planets coming here or human beings doing it while we sleep, because so many of those sightings occur at night. Do you have a take on that?
Sure. 3 things that I know about ETs. They are not trapped in a place like we are. Okay. They not only have figured out how to get here physically, but they can get here OBE as well. And they can remote view us as well. Outside of this dimension, there is no time, there is no distance, nothing. And they know how to cross those barriers easily. And yes, there have been times where even my craft, Talata, has shown up here OBE and just sat and looked. And what amazes me about that is the very first thing out of my mouth is, well, how many people saw you? Okay, I want to know that right off the bat. And my answer was, well, it just depends on who could see me. And I was like, well, great. What does that entail? And he said, well, you can already do that. If I showed up OBE, you would know I was OBE. You'd see me. I'm like, okay. He said, you're awake. He said, but not everybody on this planet is. They're trying to get there. Now, some people will see it because they have spurts of it. Your ability isn't dormant in your head. They're operating. It's just you controlling it and being in control of it. It's like walking. You have to learn how to walk. We all do. This is something you learn how to use. And so they'll be in a mood, or they'll be, in the right frame of mind, and they'll be just open, as you say, open to something new, and the energy jams up in their head and they go, whoa, look at that. That's why they see ghosts. That's why they see.
Explain why some people will see a UFO when other people there are not seeing it. Now, I honestly think these, ghosts are obviously around us all the time. Some
Right.
people are seeing it, some people
absolutely. Yeah. More
you
than
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Well, not everybody wants to cross over. Some people are down here. They just hang out. Yeah.
Joshua, you wrote this book, Ecology of Souls, and you obviously had to put out another volume because this is a big subject.
So the idea was to write this quaint little UFO book, and it was like, it became very apparent that I had one of 2 options. I could either do the UFO book and have these constant asides where I described older concepts like polypsychism and something that doesn't get discussed very often, this conceptualization of the soul as like a tiny being. It's something you see in a lot of ancient civilizations. I could either have these constant asides as I'm talking about the UFO thing, or I could just write about all that first so that people would be prepared to go into the UFO material and you could make easier references. So that was a big part of it too. It was always going to be one book. It's just split in half because you put those two guys together, and then you add the third book, which is just the references together, and it would be like that. And I'm not entirely sure that Amazon's book binding capabilities are up to the task just yet. so it was a very pragmatic decision. Yeah,
that's not bad though.
So what is, in a nutshell, the theme of these series?
That well, again, this is in my opinion, I do think that you start to see everything through a single lens if you look at it long enough through that lens. But I found in my experience that so much of the paranormal topic writ large does touch upon these themes of death in ways that really surprise me. A good example of that, I alluded to it earlier, but a good example of that is the whole lake monster thing. To really understand lake monsters, you have to sort of understand that the conceptualization of them was synonymous with the dragon, which was kind of synonymous with these great evil ideas that you see in various cultures, Satan or the certain serpents that devour the sun, those sort of ideas. And, then you start reading about these certain traditions among certain families, especially in, lake monster ground zero, Ireland and the British Isles. Certain families treated them as death omens in their families, no different than the banshee. Wow. And then you start looking into some of the symbolism behind lake monsters, and here's a really fascinating idea, which has some bearing on the UFO discussion as well. So we can kind of put a pin in that and come back to it if you want to. But our first coffins as a species, and granted, you have a bunch of different traditions, but like the evolution of the coffin begins with the canoe. It begins with the dugout canoe. And to this day, you can find some really ancient Chinese coffins that are actually repurposed canoes. So the coffin kind of becomes, the canoe, the boat kind of becomes a death symbol in and of itself. And everybody knows this on an instinctual level because of all this imagery that we see with psychopomps and with the idea of the boat. I mean, think about the end of the Lord of the Rings, right? Everybody gets on the boat and goes into the West, right? The land of the setting sun. So the boat is a psychopomp symbol. It's a death symbol. And what do so many of these lake monster descriptions sound like? It sounds like an overturned boat. There are plenty of descriptions. Well, people will say, "I thought it was an upside down boat," but even when that's not the case, sometimes there are indigenous Native American traditions where some lake monsters were said to be able to shapeshift into logs, and of course, I've sort of showed how logs and boats and coffins are kind of all the same imagery. Jung would definitely say that. He referred to the tree of death, the Totenbaum. Yeah, but not Tannenbaum, but Totembaum.
Totembaum, yes.
Totembaum. And so you've got that as well. Even skeptics sort of fall into this because a lot of times they'll blame lake monsters on log sightings. So you've got all this sort of symbolism, and in some ways, part of the reason I walked away from the project scared of lake monsters is because the boat is a symbol of successful transition.
Right.
But what's an overturned boat? That's kind of a little bit ominous.
A failed day.
Yeah. One of the things that sort of blew my mind was, in Egypt, there's the afterlife trials of weighing the heart against a feather. And if your heart was considered too heavy, it would be tossed to Ammit. And Ammit was a crocodile, lion, hippopotamus hybrid, the three animals that were most frightening to the Egyptians. And those descriptions pop up in a lot of lake monster reports too. Crocodiles and the manes of water horses. Like the people will describe these water horses with long flowing manes, and it's like, well, it's kind of like a lion's mane. And then obviously that overturned boat shape kind of sounds like a hippopotamus. And you've got these dark traditions of comparing the serpent to the dragon that eats the world. And then you've got Ammit, that's the soul devourer, the overturned boat, the unsuccessful journey to the afterlife. But then, I mean, this has always boggled my mind. One of the people who set up shop on the shores of Loch Ness was Aleister Crowley. He lived in Boleskine House. And one of the entities that Crowley worked with closely was Corazon, which was syncretized and synonymous with Apep, who was also quite closely related to Ammit. So, and you find these little bits and bobs throughout other like lake monster books, like the Ted Holiday stuff. Daniel Ormond, I think, was another one. He was on a lake monster expedition in one of the fjords in Scandinavia, and he says that he was in a canoe with his guide, and this big hump appears in the water and starts coming towards them, and he's freaking out. And his guide says, "No, don't worry about that. They don't harm you physically. They just harm your soul." And so you just see these little hints and tidbits throughout all the lake monster stuff that once you put that sort of overlay of like this corrupting serpentine force, not that I think snakes get a bad rap, that's a different discussion, but once you put those things together, it starts to look really consistent in an eerie sort of way. So but that's a good example, because obviously it's not a book about lake monsters. The main focus is UFOs, and I bring everything else into it. But that lake monster idea and all that symbolism and all that those traditions,
it was to keep people alive. Don't think about it. It was all to teach them to keep surviving. It was how you teach somebody, don't do this. This is an omen to you. You should pay attention because this means this is going to happen down the line. I have a great grandmother who was a shaman, a Sami shaman, Swedish. Okay, Laplander.
Oh yeah.
Okay, now that's part of my ethnicity. And when I was very young, she started telling me stories about the days when they survived, her family, before they were Laplanders. They were on the sea. They were Vikings. And she said it was, if you stay on the water for long enough, something's going to happen, always. Okay? Yep. And they kept people alert with these omens because it didn't let them sleep. It kept them alert. Okay, it was a survival tactic for them. She explained that to me in vivid, colorful detail. She
That makes
said,
sense.
no Viking worth anything would fall asleep on watch on a boat or even at the oar, okay, or even with a weapon in his hand to survive. The storms would come up. They needed to know the portents for that. They needed to know what would happen when they were coming up on. And you got to remember, we're polluted now. We don't understand that there are millions and billions of animals that are dead because of us in the sea. And we have whole ethnicities of people who are eating up everything they can get their hands on out of the water as well. Okay. 8.4 billion people mean the sea's being plowed. Okay. So creatures that you wouldn't normally see now, they were seeing then. In numbers, they were seeing them. And I'm telling you, I have seen some things myself on the sea. I've been on the sea. And let me tell you, there's no explaining it. It is big and I've never seen it before. And oh my God, what the hell? Okay?
Terrifying. Yeah.
Right. And you can't catch it and go, what is this? So you're living with this in your mind, in your heart, that I just saw this beast and you can amplify it. Oh my God, you can amplify it. I've had to stop myself billions of times, billions of saying more than what I saw because I could describe it now and I refuse because I'll just tell you three things. It was big, it was long, and it was fierce. Okay. And it scared the bejeebies out of me because I thought if it could get over the rail, we're done. Okay. And that's all I could think. Survive. Okay. And we did. And I lived to see another day. And think about how these people bringing all these stories and all these ethnic ways to survive and working at it. And the commonalities between them all add up to three things. One, there's stuff in nature that is big, bigger than we know. Okay. There's a reason that we have to stay alert to survive. Okay. And then the other one is how do you tell these stories to people without them taking it to heed, to their heart? And that means they're going to amplify it, blow it up, and make unbelievable tales about it just to impress you enough to be aware. Okay. And this is following us all the way through to now. And we don't sit down and think about that. What were they thinking? What is their perspective? We're just looking at it from ours. And we have to crawl into their heads, sleep in their knapsacks, and literally live like they did, somehow work that out to understand what those stories actually really meant. See what I'm saying?
People forget there's a past out there.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, we need to take a quick station ID break.
Okay.
I want to let you all know you're watching The Lightgate. I'm your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Saffron. Our guest tonight is Joshua Cutchin, author of many books, such as The Trojan Feast, which I have here, Ecology of Souls, which we're talking a little bit about right now. Let me pull that up. Here's the beautiful cover.
I like that cover.
And we've been covering all kinds of topics, everything from fairy folk to lake monsters to Bigfoot and OBEs, and I mean, you name it. I've got some questions I want to ask on fairy folk before we leave that completely behind.
Okay.
But wait 1 second. I do want to tell everyone that we are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. The station's 105.3 FM and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. So thank you all for joining us. Also on Roku, YouTube, of course, and Facebook. So yeah, let's keep going because there's still a lot we haven't covered. But I want to just backtrack a little bit because
sorry about my lake monster tangent. I guess part of what I was trying to illustrate was that like that's the sort of thing that once you go down that road, you start pulling in all these different things that just sort of.
I love about these conversations. They carry. But you said a few things, and I'm like, I need to ask this because I've done a whole lot of research into UFO healing cases, people being brought on board and healed, and I haven't done any research into fairy folk healings. I wondered, have you ever run across people being healed as a result of a fairy or fae encounter?
Oh, there are a couple of private groups on Facebook that I'm a part of that you would find hundreds of stories from. But if we're looking strictly at the historical record, I mean, that is very much the same thing. I would say that, in the Western European tradition, you've got a lot of stories of, for lack of a better term, judgment-free term, witches who would learn their powers from the fairy folk. Sometimes would obtain special what's the word? Poultices and powders and things from the Fae folk to be used in healing. And in the New World, there are a couple of different traditions that sort of speak to the learning the art of healing from the little people. There is a tradition and there are so many different tribes that use ayahuasca. So forgive me if I don't remember the exact group of people, but there is one tradition amongst one of the ayahuasca using tribes that says that their ayahuasqueros learn from doctoritos, little doctors, who teach them those arts of healing. Down here in the Southeast, actually very close to where I grew up, was the Catawba Indian people, and they at one point would sometimes have members of their own tribe interact with who they call the Yehasuri, the wild Indians. But you read about it and it's like missing time and the sound of babies crying in the woods, and it's like, okay, this is a fairy analog, right? And there's a great paper, I can't recall exactly who wrote it off the top of my head, but there's a great paper that was done that sort of looked into some of these traditions in this sort of western central part of North Carolina. And they discussed how in one instance there was a young man, I believe, who was taken from the tribe by the Yehasuri, and all of the blood was taken out of his arm, which to me sounds quite similar to the what we've come to expect from some UFO encounters, at least of the David Jacobs variety and all that. But the blood taken from his arm, and he learned replaced, and he learned the arts of healing from one of the wild Indians, according to this Catawba informant. So there's plenty of stories of that. And looking forward to my original reference to some of these private groups, I mean, there are people who still practice interactions with fairies to this day. There's such a stigma around the word fairy. Like, when people talk about the reality of UFOs, they say, well, it's UFOs. It's not like you're believing in fairies, because the implication is
fairy tale.
Yeah, that's the crazy. Yeah, just a fairy tale, all that stuff. So there's a certain level of secrecy about some of the ways that people practice this stuff, but they all have stories about the good things and the bad things, quite frankly, that can come from dealing with the good folk, including things like healings. Yeah.
And going back to the whole theme of exploring death, which I'm glad you're approaching, because so many people are just, I don't want to talk about death, it's too scary.
Oh my goodness, my wife, I'll never forget, my wife was like, you're writing a book about death? No one's gonna like that. I'm like, no, it's because that's what happens. I mean, for the longest for the longest time, it was like, don't talk about sex and politics at the dinner table. And it's like, well, let's add UFOs and death and religion, and so it's kind of all those things, right? And that's what I think is sort of kind of beautiful about it, is that it is so many of those things.
That is part of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And we've done ourselves such a disservice by not
paying attention.
Yeah, being intimate with it and being in the room with people as they pass and having that sort of one-on-one experience. We just sort of ignore it until the last possible minute. And it didn't used to be that way anywhere, quite frankly. Like, if you go back far enough in time, there are all sorts of traditions for dealing with this and preparing yourself. Yeah. And quite frankly, knowing what to expect. I mean, in the modern world, we sort of treat it as an automatic process. And, some of that's because of Christianity that doesn't really go into that sort of transitional mode. But you've got these psychopomp figures in a lot of different cultures. And they would guide you, and you would be told different things to look out for as you made the transition, paths to take and paths that you shouldn't take as you make that transition. And we just sort of ignore it nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I love the books on near-death experiences. I've learned a lot from them. And they also have their healing aspect too. Lots of people have a near-death experience. I mean, we have a family friend who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was not expected to survive, had a near-death experience because she was so bad off, came back and rallied, recovered. Mm-hmm. Her cancer was gone, and they could not explain it. She became a miracle patient.
the NDE literature, I think, is one of the strongest bodies of evidence out of a lot of these different topics. I mean, again, I'm on Team UFO, so I'm not saying that about UFO, but like when somebody tells me that they don't believe in UFOs, I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But when somebody says they don't believe in, quite frankly, psi phenomena or NDEs, I'm like, now wait a minute. There's been a lot of good research, a lot of stuff, and that I think at this point, you know, I'm almost comfortable with saying that people are consciousness deniers, you know, if they don't believe in that stuff.
Exactly.
Ecology of Souls, dive into like people who have near-death experiences and CETs.
Absolutely. And you know, I saw an interesting, I would love to get your take on this, Preston, because I saw someone complaining about that sort of Kenneth Ring line of research, and they said, well, if the NDE and the UFO contact experience have so many similarities, why don't people see grays more often during NDEs? And I'm like, well, hold on. Number one, they do. Like, that's a thing. But number two, I think that people really underestimate how often beings in UFO experiences appear either human-like or appear as beings of light. I mean, those are really common things, and both of those are all over every near-death experience, you know. So to say that, like, oh, it doesn't look like this sort of the popular gray alien in near-death experiences, therefore it can't be a related thing, I think that's a little bit underinformed. I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, it does happen. I've interviewed people who, you know, are describing the experience, and depending on the belief system you carry, I think one might say this is a near-death experience. The other might say, no, this is a UFO, you know, an onboard encounter.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these cases, I'm like, well, gosh, you know, they're kind of both.
Well, that's how Ray Fowler got all mixed up. Is he looked into the Betty Andreasson stuff, and he was like, what is this? Like, where do I slot this particular experience? Because there was so much of that crossing over in that.
She called them angels all through day one.
And the doorway to the one that through which everyone shall pass. I mean, it's full of this sort of NDE image. The image of a phoenix. I mean, that's you don't get a more blatant sort of death and rebirth archetype than the phoenix, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it's and I think that the key, at least for me, you know, as someone who has a deficit of experiences, the key for me is to be like, I'm not going to say which it is, but I am going to say, like, this is what the experiencer identifies it as. This is what this experiencer identifies it as, and look at how similar they are. Right. Don't know which is. I don't think there is a hierarchy, but I don't know which is, you know, which should be interpreted, which should fold into the other one. But I'm just saying that, look, these things do look like they have overlap, and that's sort of one of the things I try to do.
I do have a few cases where people essentially died. I mean, this is what the ETs told them, that you actually died in this car accident.
Well, I mean, there's been some speculation that's what the whole Travis Walton thing was, right? Like, you know, a big resuscitation attempt.
Right.
So, you know, perhaps, you know, but the only problem with that is that, and I say this as someone who started having the suspicion myself and had to pull myself back from the brink. You start saying, like, well, maybe everybody dies when they have a UFO contact experience. And you start being like, oh, it's all, you know, varying degrees of that. And I said, wait, no, that's a little bit too far. Like, pump the brakes. Yeah. Because I mean, it really comes down to that extended consciousness effect, right? I mean, which is why you end up lumping in altered states of consciousness, you know, pharmaceutical, physiological, all these different altered states of consciousness, and the shamanic initiations and the near-death experiences. It's all, I think that it's related in taking you, if not to the same space every time, beyond this space, and that's the most important thing. It's a threshold event. Yeah.
One thing you said kind of made me wonder, because, you know, I did get really into astral projection and out-of-body experiences, and had a lot of personal experiences with it. But when I started doing it, Joshua, I would pop out and I would create feasts of food. I mean, talk about, you know, food.
Yeah.
In the after-death state, I would become, I mean, there's a whole tradition of, quote, hungry ghosts.
Yeah.
You know, which are earthbound and they're seeking sensation. And I know exactly what that feels like, because I would get this overwhelming hunger and thirst. and other feelings as well. But yeah, I create feasts of food and just gorge on it. So they're eating the afterlife food. I'm coming back. Thank God.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting. There's a weird parallel again there.
Yeah, there's something about it. I mean, I'm working on a different project, and there are stories. I'll keep this as vague as I can because I haven't collected all the details, but there are stories of people who have been fasting for blood work and eaten something, and the blood work reflects been fasting for blood work, eaten something in a dream, and the blood work the next day suggests that they had eaten something. And it's like, well, what is, I think that we just have such a poor, we have very much along the same way that we've sort of drawn these battle lines between each other in all these different ways. We've drawn battle lines between physical and mental, and between, inner and outer. We've drawn these distinctions that I just don't think are as strong as we like to think they are, or that we're told they are.
Exactly. I agree.
Very interesting. Well, we are starting to stack up some questions. When you guys are ready, we can bring them from chat. Yeah. Shall we start now then?
Sure.
All right. I don't know about this one, but all questions are on the table, so I'm just going to put it out there from Mr. Emmett.
Well, it's really sad that I know exactly what's being talked about here. Oh man. Okay.
And if you can, I'll read it because we have people on radio who can't see. It's a question for Joshua. Josh, can you share some stories about the craziest aspects and stories relating to the phenomena, like, and I've never heard of this, the greaser Fawn's Bigfoot smoker, or the cigarette smoking trench coat dogs? Well, crazy. Should I know this?
No, it's pretty insider baseball. Well, I believe that the cigarette smoking trenchcoat dogs are a reference to those stories from Skinwalker Ranch, where there were supposedly just some like dogmen smoking cigarettes that were seen by the side of the road. But the greaser Fawn's Bigfoot is like one of my favorite stories. I'm trying to remember exactly where it took place, but if memory serves, it was in Pennsylvania. This is where the footprints end, 1 or 2.
That's Bigfoot there.
Yeah. And it's like Pennsylvania is weird. It's got a lot of weird stuff going on. So there's these two individuals, these two men, maybe father, son, I can't remember those details. Again, maybe Pennsylvania, but the broad strokes of the story are accurate. They're driving along this path in their ATVs, their 4-wheelers, and they have a roadside crossing of a Bigfoot that goes into a forest. And, they want to see it, but they're like, hey, you know what? I know, there's a relatively confined area of woodland. I know where it should be coming out, and we can sort of loop around to the other side of this patch of woods and see it on its way out, maybe. So they hit the gas and they go all the way around, and when they get to the other side, there isn't a Bigfoot, but there's this guy who is dressed like a 50s greaser, black jacket and everything, smoking a cigarette. If memory serves, the cigarette didn't smoke, but it was lighting up, just some little odd detail like that. But a greaser there, and they're talking like, hey, did you happen to see anything? He's like, no, I live around here somewhere, and I didn't see anything. And they can't help but notice that this guy is also wearing, in addition to his his black leather jacket and all this stuff, he's wearing these white shoes. And the entire area that they've been driving has been these muddy dirt roads. And they're like, how did you get here? And one of them turns to say something to the other one. They both take their eyes off the guy, and they turn back, and he's gone. Now, was that Bigfoot shape shifting into the fawns? I don't know, but and again, correlation doesn't imply causation or anything like that, but it's odd that they saw a Bigfoot and then they ran into that guy. And I think it would be even stranger if they saw Bigfoot and then ran into that guy, and those two things weren't related in any sort of way, because any one of those events would be odd, but to have them juxtaposed together in the same encounter is especially strange.
It's the weird intersection of phenomenon that we sometimes see.
I mean, that is top shelf vintage high strangeness. Like that is like 20-year-old aged Wisconsin cheddar. That's what that is. Yeah, top shelf.
Reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode where the thugs came and they were actually ETs and they're wearing leather jackets. And I've got a few cases like that. One lady, she was basically seduced by a guy who ended up being ET, but she described him that way.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder.
I mean, if you were to, something about that feels quintessentially American, right? So if you were to present an alien intelligence with like, look like an American, like that might be something that they would pick. Is that sort of, yeah.
I'm a nurse, and the very first thing I start thinking when I hear stories like this coming out of people's mouths is, I'm going to not focus on the story. I want to focus on you for 10 minutes. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your ethnic? What's your educational level? Do you work? Where do you work? What do you have going on? And a lot of times, because of our culture now and the generations of it that we have going on, there's too many drugs floating around, and there are too many people who are high as kites, worse than, and they see things and because they're out of their minds, and you have to almost try to vet them personally before you even try to understand what the heck they just told you, to understand where is this coming from, And we need to do more of that, because we have too many people now who are drugged, high, not even, mostly delusional in their thinking because of our society and the things we have going on.
It's beyond just drugs too. I think this speaks to the basis of a lot of your research. It's our belief system. It's the culture you come from. We perceive through our belief system.
Right.
And, this is the whole Jacques Vallée kind of theory, that this is a phenomenon that is playing towards our cultural beliefs.
Yeah.
But I wonder, if it's the belief system that is more kind of clouding our actual view of what's really there.
Really there. That's why we need to be more detective. We need to be more interested in where the stories are coming from, who they're coming from, and work them out individually as quickly as possible, like right in the moment when it happens. We're not set up for that right now. We don't have people, MUFON works, but they come out days later. I used to think we have an emergency team. That means be there right now, catch up with this person. And, it's important to gather information. You can't just believe anything on the top of it. You must research it. And vet it.
So this was collected by a different researcher that I put in my book, but here's the problem that I run into a little bit sometimes is that I've talked to enough people who have used substances like mushrooms or DMT or ketamine and different things, and like sometimes those definitely have the flavor of something that I would just call I distinguish between hallucinations and like psychedelic visions or hallucinogens and psychedelics, right? That's a very fine line, but like just very much in the same way that we have like inconsequential dreams and we have important dreams, I think that sometimes what people see in these altered states of consciousness can be frivolous and inconsequential, and sometimes can actually be something that has some sort of objective reality to it. So
you gotta ferret that out.
Trying to draw that line is difficult. I mean, I read a story the other day about a guy who was found naked running down the streets of a town in Florida, yelling that he was Thor and trying to like with a hammer. Obviously,
Florida.
obviously, I'm going to pass judgment and say that he was not Thor, but some of this other stuff, it does kind of get a little bit murky. So
yeah, it's okay. From my perspective, I'm an experiencer. I've been with ETs, I had to let Preston vet me for a long time. I had to give him every ounce of information about myself that I could present to him, and he had to climb into my life, to even my friends, family, everything. I mean, he vetted me. It was like being periscoped, okay? And I honored that because I don't want to be believed just because it said it, okay?
Right.
I have proof, and I have videos, and I have pictures, and I have experiential knowledge that not just anybody's walking around with. Okay.
And it's not about being believed.
Right. Well, I want people to look it up though and figure it out. That's the point. We all are responsible for that. We can hear stories until the cows come home, but until we're able to enlighten ourselves in the process of vetting it ourselves and gleaning the knowledge for ourselves. And that means educating ourselves as well, because a lot of people don't have that foundational scientific knowledge based or, language based, or, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there that you have to accumulate to even process through a lot of this stuff. And it's sad to me because we've been dumbing down centuries of it. And it makes me sad to think about that. So now here I am trying to tell people about something. And I think to myself, how do I get them to realize what I'm saying? What is the most important thing that I can help them understand about what I'm saying, the message that I'm bringing? Before I came out, they briefed me for almost a year because they warned me. They gave me a full palette of what to expect and how to deal with circumstances that I'm going to run into. And the first one is perform for no one. I'm not your performer. The second one is challenge you to know what I know. Okay, that's my second outputting of how I want you to hear what I'm saying. Vet me, I challenge you, prove me wrong, prove me right, whatever you want to do, but think about it. That's all I'm asking you to do. I'm not going to tell you things that you can't understand, and I'm not going to weave yarns of stories that make no sense whatsoever. I'm trying to give you absolute facts, provable truths. Okay. So when I look at other people talking, I'm looking for a way to find their truth with them. Okay. I'm looking for a way to understand what they're saying and then vet into that. In other words, pick it apart, take it apart. And sometimes I work with people who are just blind with fear and can't work past anything until they look at it from another place that's safe for them and relive it just by watching it in their minds, Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you start to see two things happen. Oh my God, it wasn't really that, it was this. Why did I do that? Well, it's humans in fear will see just about anything, honest to God, anything. And that's a bad thing. So when people are talking, like I said, I see, like you do, I see the commonalities of the stories. And yes, if you're having real experiences, they all line up with everybody else who is. Mm-hmm. The commonalities are what grounds you into reality. But then it's time to ask these people and yourself, really look at it from all sides. We were watching something on TV today about what is it, that flight 470? Is it 470? 370. And they're coming out with new information about it and everything. And the light bulbs started popping off. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the knowledge that we should have had a year or two ago is just now coming out. And it gives you a broader view of all the variables of why this plane went down and information about it. And yeah, you end up asking a lot of questions, but you also see possibilities start happening in your mind. And that's what it takes. It could take 2 years or 3 years to figure it out, but everybody needs to do that. I don't want to just hear your story. I want you to keep working on it yourself. I want you to fix.
I got another really good question that I would like to bring up because it speaks to all of this. And it's a long one and it's complicated. So hold on, Josh. This is from Mr. MH. And the question is the phenomenon projecting a front in that it projects an idealized picture of what it wants people to see based on the time period and its cultural context of the time it manifests? That's a big pill.
Yeah. No, I've given this some thought. Because my question about something like fairy sightings is that even in the modern day, they appear dressed like medieval peasantry, right? Yeah. But they've been dressed that way since they were being seen by medieval peasants, So like the fairies of that period were dressed contemporarily, but they've just sort of been arrested in that time frame. And unless, again, if it's somehow tied up in the UFO thing, it seems to be farther than we are stylistically in terms of fashion, whatever, or not.
This is
going
to be another book, Joshua. Just
clothes.
Just no, alone.
Yeah, I mean it's a book all about UFO onesies, and jumpsuits and stuff. I mean, yeah, I think that there's something to that. Again, from my perspective, setting aside what I think these phenomena might be, I do see certain expectations being met and certain sort of mechanical thresholds being exceeded. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to Valet's idea that the technology always stays one step ahead of us in terms of the UFO phenomenon. I mean, I otherwise I don't really know exactly how to reconcile the airship wave of the early 20th century. So it seems like there's some so I don't think that there was like a bunch of rogue inventors who popped up for 20 years and then disappeared. So I don't know what that says about the nature of the phenomenon, but I do think that there's kind of this evolution that we see of the way that these things present themselves. You had the airships, and then you had the Art Nouveau flying saucers, and obviously these things mix and match, and you still see some of them here and there today. But you had the airships, the saucers, the black triangles, which are sort of that 1980s Belgian wave and sort of that stealth bomber sort of era. It's kind of in the zeitgeist of that era. And now that we think about drones so often, we're hearing about the Tic Tac drones, although I don't think there have been as many sightings of the Tic Tacs are not an icon of 2020's UFO sightings the way that those other shapes were, if that makes any sense. But still, it does speak to this idea of like the shapes of these things evolving. Who knows? Maybe they're just getting new makes and models on their craft. Like that could be it. But I also, personally, I think that there's something here that's sort of seeing, oh, this is where they are. So let's like jump a couple of generations ahead of them each time. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. I mean, there's no doubt your beliefs play a role in how they perhaps will manifest, because we've got cases of contactees who we'll see. There's Anna Jamerson and Beth Collins. She's driving along and she saw what she thought was a cowboy. He was wearing a hat. He had a little mustache. It was, of course, a gray dressed up as a cowboy. But little kids seeing clowns and superheroes and teddy bears, and they're projecting this image. I don't think this is, I don't know, Dolly might have an opinion on this. You're looking at me, Dolly. But
I've never seen a gray dressed up, just saying. Honest to God, I know it's happened.
Well, perhaps they're projecting that image.
Right. You can't do that. You're an autonomous being, and you will see what you're going to see. It's your mind that's seeing it. All they can do is ask you what you're looking at and agree with you mentally. And if you're seeing something that looks to you like this, they'll agree with it, and that's what snaps in your brain. That's what you see.
Like a subconscious handshake.
Yeah, exactly. And they do that. It's like, I'm standing in a shadow, and you're looking at me in the shadow, and I see a clown. Is that a clown? And they go, yes, you see the clown. Okay. Or a cowboy, or things like that. Now, sometimes you got to remember that ETs are ethnically like us. Okay. They're humanoid, and a lot of them look like us. Oh boy, do they. And they have carte blanche when they're here to run around like us, and they will dress up like us. Like Preston and I were going down the road one day, and 80-mile stretch of road with nothing but windmill farms on either side of us. Solid government windmill farms. And halfway through, we're like running out of gas, so we need to get to the next town. And what do we see on the right side of the road? We see a Rastafarian guy pushing a subway cart in the grass on the side, like his life depended on him. He's like, and it's 110 in the shade right then.
This is the middle of nowhere. It's not possible.
It's not possible. It could not have happened. We both saw it. We both instantly reacted to him. And I'm like, turn around, go after that guy. And he said, we're going to run out of gas, so I'm not going to do it. And I was like, God dang it. I mean, his clothes, his hair, the hat he was wearing, the cart he was pushing, we both described it exactly as each other. We saw it.
We'll never forget it.
And it blew my mind. I thought, well, and I had to call I made contact with my contact and said, what the heck is going on? He said that was a ET. It looks like y'all, and he's coming up for some reason and showing himself to you, whatever, I don't know. And I said, oh my God. And it has plagued me ever since it happened. I can't forget it at all. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times and made sure that I see exactly as I saw it, and what I was thinking. And Preston, that's
unusual enough just to see him walking there, but with a Subway sandwich cart
and running in the grass. That cart, not on the road where it's easy with the wheels. No, you had to be in the grass, the dead grass, because it's
he got 2 cars in that whole trip.
Yeah. And the only thing I could think of is the government is weird, okay? And they might have been playing with us because there are cameras everywhere, through this government
That wasn't weird.
reservation.
There are cameras everywhere now, but yeah, like everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe they're playing with us,
You know
what's react.
What's interesting to me in this discussion too is that, like, this is, you sort of alluded to this earlier about the near-death experiences, Preston, about how there are these expectations that sort of get grafted onto this boilerplate experience. And it's always interesting to see where someone's culture or beliefs will influence that experience and where it deviates. I mean, so, it's widely regarded that that is indeed the case. Your expectations will influence your near-death experience. But Dr. Gregory Shushan, who is formerly of Oxford University, has done a lot of work with indigenous and ancient civilizations and their near-death experiences. And he made it a point to point out that it's almost as if the experience will conform to cultural expectations to a point, but there's certain imagery that you can never get rid of. So his example was that Zuni afterlife traditions didn't really talk about bright lights, but Zuni NDEs would feature bright lights because that was just part of the NDE experience. And I kind of see something similar going on with the UFO experience too. Like there's some stuff that does have this dialogue with our own beliefs, but then there's some stuff that's like, no, that's just what it is. Like you got to get over it. That's what it's going to be. What it's going to be. Yeah.
The similarities have as much to teach us as the differences.
Yes.
I think we say it in a nutshell. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to get Preston's sister-in-law to draw it for me one day. We're going to have to give her
we're going to have to do
because it was phantasmagorical. I mean, it was real. And it happened to both of us. We instantly saw him come he was running toward us. He was on the right side of the road. And I'm like, God dang it. And I really wanted to go after him. And Preston's like, nope, we'll run out of gas. Nope. And we have 40 more miles to go.
The road, you couldn't really turn around on it anyway.
No, I know.
Wasn't that?
Well, pragmatism takes precedence sometimes. That's for sure. Yeah.
Okay, let's pop up a few more questions here. This is not a question, just a comment from Tim Houston, who says, still reading Ecology of Souls.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It takes a while.
Yeah,
but thank you.
Drop it on top of here again so people can check it out. I love the cover, by the way.
I know.
You've got really good covers on your books.
Yeah,
that's important.
I try to pick a different cover artist every time. That was recommended to me by my friend Tim Renner, who I did the Bigfoot books with. The artist of the Ecology of Souls was Johnny Decker Miller, and he does. You should visit his website. It's gorgeous. He does a lot of stuff in like wood etching style and sort of that Byzantine style is exactly what I was.
It fits the theme really well. Yeah. So very cool. All right, this is not really it is a question, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but Dolly and I have been watching this. Has anyone seen Beetlegeese lately? How close is that thing to supernova? We're watching it.
Less than 12 months within a year. It's going. It is. I clock it. I watch it all the time. And about a year ago, it still had a physicality to it. Now it's nothing but turning in on itself like dough in a blender, and you can actually see holes in space behind it. It opens up. That means it's really, really, really close to running out of energy. And when that happens, and it's darkening now, it's really darkening. It's getting darker and darker and darker. That means less and less and less available energy to it. And once it gets down to that core and it loses all the energy, everybody's going to see it do two things real fast. It's going to go solidly dark, and then you're going to see an explosion. That explosion will happen instantaneous. When it goes solidly dark, it goes at that point because all the energy
already happened because the light we're seeing is.
Oh yeah, millions of years ago, years ago. But we're seeing it in our time now, and
right.
You'll see it in the daytime sky. If it blows and we're in daylight, you'll see it. And so I try to keep it on a TV all the time because if we see it, I'm gonna run out the door so I can get it on camera, from the sky, because that's cool. And there's another one you need to pay attention to that it's not regularly out there. Polaris is about to go supernova, and we're close to that one. That means the North Star is going to show up briefly in a giant poof, and then be no more. You won't see it anymore. That's big. That's really big.
Are we going to get bombarded with radiation from either of those?
No.
Okay, they're far enough away. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the 2020s, so anything's on the table nowadays. So.
No, we're not in line. We're not in line with them. So, let's
Okay.
see. Okay.
Okay, we have some more questions here, and we're running out of time. So I want to see if we can get to them. Oh,
Okay.
wrong button. Hold on a second. Here's the right button. Okay, let me see. Here's a quick one from Tim Houston. Justin, have you seen A Dark Song?
I just recommended that to one of the guys in my band the other night.
What is it?
It's a film. I believe it's still on Netflix. And again, I'm not a practicing occultist. I keep that stuff at arm's length. But I have talked to friends who are, and they're like, it's pretty darn accurate. Obviously, there's some stuff that they get wrong, but in terms of the way that my occultist acquaintances have had spirits manifest and the sort of things that would happen, like you can tell that the people who did it did their homework. And I would say a little bit about it, but I think to even provide a synopsis might spoil
right,
it.
don't,
yeah,
please,
but
yeah.
it's a great, it's a fantastic movie in terms of accuracy and depiction of actual what spirit contact looks like. So I have heard from my friends, and you watch it, it sort of has that authenticity to it. So 2 thumbs up for me. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Here is another quick one. Justin Singh is asking, lake monsters, what's your feelings on octopi? There's been a lot of talk about that in the scientific world.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they necessarily are from another planet. Maybe either of you two would have some insight on that. But I think that there's a lot to learn from them in terms of just the sort of convergent evolution that you see with like the development of the octopus eye, which serves the same function as the human eye, but has a completely different lineage. And I think that might teach us a lot about extraterrestrial life. But as far as the idea that octopi were brought here by panspermia, who knows?
No.
I don't.
They were brought here by ET. They were planted here,
Okay.
and they are sentient. They're extremely intelligent.
Yeah,
and
that
it's
needs to be
a type of configuration on them that we need to pay attention to because we're capable of that ourselves.
Yeah, I will. I will say to that point, like I used to love eating calamari, and then probably about 20 yeyears ago, I was like, yeah, I really shouldn't be doing this, so I stopped. So yeah.
Yeah. I can't. I don't even like going there. Yeah.
So here is another unusual question for you from Mr. MH. Question for Joshua: is the phenomenon projecting fear through its manifestation as a form of energy vampirism? I'm not sure which phenomenon you're talking about here, Mr. MH, but
well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. The first of which would be this, because I see that as two questions. It's the energy vampirism question and the projecting fear question. I suspect that a lot of these encounters do mirror the psychedelic experience in terms of like the importance of set and setting. I think a lot of what you get will be the mindset with which you perceive something. If you approach it with fear, it's probably going to be more frightful. I don't know if research bears that out, but that's something that I've kind of noticed.
Yeah.
Fear plays a role, no doubt.
And as far as the energy vampirism thing, like the longer I've gotten into this sort of field, the more I've tended to view the phenomenon as mostly positive. But that doesn't mean that there aren't negative things, and it doesn't mean that there aren't things that have positive outcomes that have to use negative things to get there. But specifically to the point of the energy vampirism thing, I'm working on a project right now with a colleague of mine looking at anomalous light phenomena, these plasmas and such. And that's something that we have noticed in some cases, that there does seem to be a sort of vampiric energy aspect. And not only does it seem to bear itself out, I mean, again, not all the time, like we found this in some cases. But not only does that bear itself out in some cases, there are certain traditions, the exact places escape me at the moment, but there are some bodies of folklore that speak to the plasmas, the balls of light, doing things like that. So it seems possible to me.
Can I say something? Mm-hmm. Just really quickly. I wanna speak to this because it's important. I want people to hear this. humans have a preoccupation with control, with ownership, with power that exceeds everything. And they take pleasure, they take unbelievable pleasure in taking power away from other people. And they will put them in fear so that they feel like that they are actually doing that. They are emotionally, physically, spiritually terrorizing them so that they can have power over them. And it is a type of vampirism. Vampirism isn't just blood, it's hate. It's the knowledge of power and what you can do. It's bullying in the extreme. And the other thing I want to say here is that when I say that ET can remote view you, I can remote view you. And I show up as a ball of light when people see me. I've been on camera, people have gotten pictures of me. If I am evil and I'm doing this and I'm watching you be tortured and hurt and killed, I'm exerting a desire to be powerful over this situation. And it always, always, always falls back on that. The desire to be owned without exception, without the work of doing things for yourself and building power for yourself and knowing that you're capable and you don't need other people's power to be powerful. And that's where humans have a big lie on them. This is where lying comes in the extreme. People are taught now and have been taught for quite some time that power is the extreme high. We're all drug addicted in its ways. The human brain is habitual, and addictions occur in a billion different ways for this physical mind that we have. And power is the worst. Ego is the worst. And I want people to understand that if you go in that route, you will reap what that does to you. You're not hurting somebody else. You're doing it to you. They're walking away from it. And this is where death is so important to understand. Most people walk out of that. You can hurt me and my body may be screaming, but my soul is already gone. And if you're taking me out, you're going to extreme kill me and take pleasure in it. It doesn't matter. I've already left. I'm already okay. I'm already healed from it. You've done nothing to me, just the body. That's it. And it's not occupied when you're doing it if I'm leaving. Okay, you have to understand that there are huge processes at play here, and these people are delusional in the extreme as well. And people need to start seeing what this is for what it really is. I'm serious.
And well, I couldn't agree more in a lot of respects. I mean, I think that there's something really potent about that metaphor of the vampire. Like, what do you do with the vampire? Well, you have to invite it in, you know. And I think that there's something about that. You invite it into your life, you know. There's something important there.
That movie Fright Night was a good. That was a good movie. Yeah. I know, Dolly, you don't like horror movies, but that one was good.
I don't watch them at all, ever. I saw King Kong when I was about 3 years old. I was on the floor. My parents were watching the old black and white, the old one. And I was like, nope. And I went to my room. And what do I dream that night? King Kong is looking in every window of my house and he's coming to get me. And I'm like,
that was the first movie I saw, and it turned me into a monster kid. So you can never tell. Yeah. You can never tell.
Oh, no.
That's funny.
Nope.
Okay, here's another question, which I'm not sure I quite understand here. White Dragon, Preston, Dolly, or Cutchin? Joshua. I know that the cryptids are riled up recently. What do you make of it? Containment is what comes to mind here. The cryptids riled up. I'm not sure I've heard this.
I as someone who has ended up sort of peripherally following some like YouTube communities and stuff, I feel like I am hearing about more cryptid sightings. Again, I can't verify them. You know, most of the times it's a picture of a blurry forest and there's a red circle around it. But in a broader sense, I kind of wonder, you know, there's been so many wheels turning on stuff like disclosure. And I just think that I don't know that if the world wasn't as topsy-turvy as it is right now, if it wouldn't be disclosure time, you know? Like, the things that we're going through it's the trickster era. It's a turbulent time. It feels like it just happens to be UFO time, because any other time that something would have been disclosure-ish, or there would have been so much acknowledgement of these things, I think it would have been a lot more noticed than it is in the 2020s. So I can't help but find the timing of some of this stuff really suspicious to me. You know, in terms of it being, well, I'm sorry?
You want to hear irony?
Yeah.
ET's not here right now. They haven't been here for 2 years.
Okay.
They're not here. Everything that's going on this planet is situated from us. Period.
Yeah, I will believe that. That's for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we have affecting us, all of us, the whole planet, animals, everybody, is the fact that our sun is blowing off high amounts of energy at us.
Yeah.
It does affect our brains. It does affect our hearts. It does affect our immune system. It does affect our DNA. And all the explosions in emotion and things that are happening and animals losing their minds and going crazy, all of that is because our sun is in solar maximum and our magnetosphere is down.
Well, here's a question, Dolly, real quick, because we are running out of time and I want to get through we have like 10 more.
All right.
This is from Sly Martins. Wow, caught a live one. Yay. Question. Can't ET lightgate in a second if needed instead of bailing out? Takes days for an EMP to reach Earth. Thanks. Love you to bits.
We're in a solar system, and that sun's energy goes far and wide from the sun all the way out past Pluto and beyond. If they came into a light gate right now, they would have to come into our magnetosphere because it's the only place they're safe. And they're not safe here because our poles are excursioning and the electromagnetic guidelines, field lines, ley lines, if you want to call them that, are chaotic. They're doing this. They're not stable. They're doing weird things, and they would either crash or be hit or blow up, or any number of disasters would happen to them the second they hit our solar system, unless they could get into Earth's magnetosphere. And like I said, our magnetosphere is down 40%. They don't stand a chance here. That's why they're not here. They're not going to come in. They're waiting for our poles to change, and then they'll be back. And we have to survive long enough to have that happen. So think about it.
All right. Now let's do a quick fire for these last 10.
Okay.
Again, from Mr. MH. Question for Joshua. I'm not sure if you can do this quick. Question for Joshua. With regards to NDEs, what's your opinion on those cases where people have crossed the other side and have either encountered heavenly or demonic beings in the religious context?
I think that it's really interesting.
Covered that, didn't we?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that people have negative NDEs. They don't get talked about as much, but they definitely happen. Yeah.
Yep.
Belief plays a role.
Yep.
Okay. This is from Josephine McKinnon for Preston and Dolly. Do you ever see little people when OBE? I haven't. I did see giants. Dolly took me to see giants. That was crazy.
Yeah. I've never seen the little people OBE, but I have seen one in real life. I was going to bring it up to you, Joshua. I actually saw
next time. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Or bring it to it now.
Yeah, I saw a fairy once. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. I'm just going to pop this up. Sure seems like Bigfoot is interdimensional. He can just disappear.
I'm hearing from more and more people in the community who will say things like, I think it's flesh and blood, but there's something strange about it. Like I hear that all the time now, and I didn't used to hear that, 7-8 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. This one I'm just going to pop up for a second and not answer it because we don't have time. What is Dolly's proof? There's a lot of it. Read Symmetry. You can come to a Q&A episode that we're going to be doing shortly. But it's photographic evidence, film evidence, corroborating witnesses, medical evidence of multiple kinds, implant and healings. And frankly, I've seen them myself. So there's a lot more than you might think, more than the average contactee by far. Sorry, I answered that for you, Dolly, but we don't have time for that.
Okay, what time is it? Oh my goodness, you have 4 minutes. Okay. Joshua, I want to know something from you. Okay, I'm going to stop everybody from asking questions right now. This is my because I want to know what you understand, not believe, understand about consciousness and life and death. I want to know your perspective on it.
Well, I hold so many things with an open hand as opposed to a closed hand, so I don't really know where I draw the line between what I know or believe. Was know or believe the difference? I mean, I tell you what I know. I know that I love my family, and I know that that's a tangible thing.
Right.
And I know that it might be ushered along through my bloodstream by a chemical cocktail coming from my brain, but that's not what it is. It's something tangible and it's something different. And I think that implies to me that we have a lot of stuff backwards about the way that the world works. I keep waiting for the revelation any day now that materialism is finally on its way out, but I think it is. I do think that something like the philosophy of idealism, or something that at least incorporates the importance of consciousness, is going to replace that. So that's kind of a quick answer to that question. Is that?
But that's a good answer. I like that answer. Okay. That just lets me know that you are genuine in your search. Okay.
Thank you.
I've talked to a lot of researchers and they're not so genuine, and I appreciate the fact that you are. You know, I see it in you, in what you say, how you consider things, everything. It's really awesome.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to bring up these books again just because I really want to thank you, Joshua, for coming onto the show. I know how much time and effort and energy it takes to put together a book. So it's awesome that you've done so many of these. They're really cool. I love the covers. You're covering important subjects. So I urge everyone to take a look. See, you can get these on Amazon, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I actually think I have all of them in stock too. So you can reach out to me through my email at my website, and we can set up signed copies as well.
Ooh, that's cool.
Right.
Okay.
There's the website right there at the bottom.
Yep.
So yeah, thank you again. We are at the last minute here. So if you have any last words you want to say? 30 seconds. We can.
it was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to the next time that this happens.
Yes.
Thank you. I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and everyone has been absolutely lovely. So thank you all so much for tonight. It's been a great time.
Yeah, well, I kind of hope that, I think it's every 3 months. You were 3 months ago.
Okay.
Today. Let's do 3 months. Let's make the date. Okay.
Okay. I'm counting ahead. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. All right. Well, after the show, we'll set the date. How's that?
Sounds good.
And I want to give a shout out to all the folks in chat as well.
Yes.
And definitely to the guys who've done super chat and super stickers. Makes a big difference. It helps keep doing this show. So thank you, Namaste and Star Orchid and W. Decker and Sonny Burnett. You guys, thank you so much. Harry Carey and Bob Thorson. You guys are awesome. Thank you, all you guys here in chat. We love you. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that ends this episode of The Lightgate on this Monday night. Reminding you that we will be starting a new schedule on July the 1st. We will be 1 hour earlier, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific. So it took me a minute. I have to wrap my brain around that. We're coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We've been on YouTube tonight. We've been on Roku, and we are on Facebook as well. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. Enjoy your lives. Be happy. Love one another. It is a good thing to do for yourself, and learn, reach out, figure things out. It's a happy thing to do in your spare time. Good night, everybody. We love you.